We're back with further updates about Hurricane Sandy. I'm Louise Story reporting for the New York Times. We have Peter Baker standing by in Washington and reports from Rockaway. We'll also have the business desk on. But first, Jim Dwyer is here from our Metro desk. Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, but it seems like this is really picking up. You probably saw just a few minutes ago the reports about a crane on 57th Street here in New York. What's going on with that?
Yeah, a crane on top of a luxury high-rise that's under construction partially collapsed. It's right across the street from Carnegie Hall, one of the most famous addresses in the city. And fortunately, no one's been hurt. And one thing, though, is early in the day, the winds are not really all that strong yet. So it's a matter of concern that stuff is not holding up even at this early hour.
I mean, how many cranes are out there around the city that when the winds accelerate tonight could fall off and potentially hit things?
Well, it's interesting. I was down at Ground Zero this morning with Governor Cuomo and others, and you can see two gigantic cranes that are being used to build that structure. They're on top of it. They're, over 1,000 feet up in the sky. Those seem to have been really tied down, nailed down. They're very secure. They face very high winds every day of the week anyway, just because of how
they're
tall
so high, over 1,000 feet.
But there's all kinds of stuff all over the city. The city did say that they have gone around and inspected every building site in the city on Sunday. Obviously things get overlooked, and something happened on 57th Street. Thankfully, no one's been hurt.
Okay, so now Governor Cuomo was here in New York. You were with him this morning. What was he doing? What's his general take on the situation?
It's interesting. Governor Cuomo has a kind of a lot of experience with hurricanes and disasters, and he
was formerly the head of HUD, the housing department for the federal government.
That's right. Yeah, and so he was down in Florida in the early 1990s during the Homestead disaster when there was a Hurricane Andrew hit down there and did so much destruction. Yeah, he's very concerned about order being kept in the streets. He's afraid that people will panic and will if they're given too much alarm about things that maybe aren't so troublesome, that they'll panic. But that said, this is a very, very serious storm. It's expected to be 1.5 feet higher than Hurricane Irene at its peak surge tonight.
The waves will be 1.5 feet higher.
That's right. The water will be 1.5 feet higher, and so there's going to be a lot of flooding. We are a city that's essentially islands. It's an archipelago, right? We have Long Island, which includes Brooklyn and Queens. We have Manhattan Island. We have Staten Island, and then the Bronx is the only part of the city that's on the mainland. So we're a very coastal, very vulnerable city in that respect.
And of course, for Governor Cuomo, who's often talked about as a potential presidential candidate down the line, handling this sort of thing seamlessly is critical, because it's very much viewed as a governor's job or a president's job to be able to handle disaster.
Right. Yeah, so he had a whole bunch of state and federal people with him this morning. They were planning, talking about all the different stuff they were doing. They're buckling down on the subways. They are bringing all kinds of boats from upstate New York that are normally used in the lakes up in the Adirondacks. They're bringing them downstate to make sure that if they need to rescue people from flooded areas and parts
that they'll have the boats on hand.
They'll be right here at hand. He's conscious of it. They closed a couple of the tunnels early in the day today just to keep traffic out of Manhattan, just to keep people. I have to say, it's pretty much like Christmas morning out there right now.
It's very empty.
Very quiet.
It's so rare for New York City to be shut down by these things. In fact, the New York Stock Exchange was closed today. It's closed tomorrow. The last time it was closed, for a hurricane, on an unscheduled closing, was Hurricane Gloria in 1985. In fact, when Governor Cuomo's father was governor. Do you remember that hurricane and what New York was like?
I do remember that hurricane very, very well, because I was out in the Rockaways. That's the most eastern part of the city, and they were very exposed and thought they were going to get a real sock in the nose from this thing. And people were going around city officials were trying to get people to evacuate their homes, and they were being stubborn. They weren't leaving. Somebody wanted to see the mayor personally before they evacuated. And at some point, I was kind of enjoying it because the waves were high and it was exciting. And then all of a sudden, I had the radio on in the car, and I heard Governor Mario Cuomo, the father of the current governor, saying, "This seems like something you're watching on TV, and we're used to experiencing the world through TV. this is not a show. This is real. If you're in a vulnerable zone, you are in danger. You have to leave right now. And actually, his son was more or less giving the same message today, 27 years later.
We've been hearing it from governors all over the country, so that is the message. Thanks so much. We'll, I'm sure, come back to you for further updates later on. Thanks again, Jim.
Okay.
Corey Kilgannon was in Rockaway with video producer Vijay Sang. They filed this report.
I grew up down here. I've been through a number of hurricanes. Hurricane Donna in 1960. Hurricane last year. We never left the area since any of the storms. So we've seen them all. And this one is definitely powerful. You can see it. There's definitely something here.
We're here in the Rockaway section of Queens in New York City. It's right on the ocean here. A lot of people live here, and it's one of the areas that New York City officials have told to evacuate. We're finding that not that many people are following that order.
My friends and I all agree that by the time they said evacuate, it was about noon, 2 in the afternoon. We were just ready for supplies in the house. Yeah, so at this point it's too late to find anyone or go anywhere.
What's the reason that you wouldn't leave here, though?
More property and
I've been
looting.
here my whole life. It's never been that bad. Even when it was bad, it wasn't that bad. So I was here in '94 when the ocean met the bag, and it wasn't even that bad.
So you think it could turn into lawlessness? That's why?
Yeah, yes. Oh yeah, big time. Oh yeah.
It did last year.
It did last year.
You gotta stay here to
I
protect
stay
your
here to
stuff?
protect my stuff. Yes. Yeah.
A lot of people are staying here. Even though the ocean is huge, the waves are big, they're close. A lot of them are breaking through the beach, into the street. And a lot of people are telling us they've really not seen anything like this in a very long time.
The wind, it's typical, but it's picking up. But the waves, I've never seen anything like it. When I see them hit the boardwalk, that's when we're in trouble, if they go over the boardwalk.
We're high grounds and we're flooding out. Yeah. Okay, so the other ones who aren't as high level as us are going to see it.
Yeah. A year ago, during Tropical Storm Irene, there was also a similar evacuation order, and the people that did evacuate, they came back and saw that they didn't really need to. So a lot of people from last year, you remember that, and they're not leaving. They're not going anywhere.
I live on the 11th floor, so I think I'm pretty good. But my car is shot. I think we will have no cars after this.
Why? What's going to happen?
Oh, the bay, the beach, and the bay on that side are going to meet, and we're going to have a river. That used to happen many, many years ago, so I think it's going to happen again.
We're still a few hours out from when the storm's really going to hit. A lot of people are just out looking at the ocean in amazement. The people aren't really scared out of their wits. They're really kind of just watching and waiting. They're kind of taking it all in. I mean, it's really pretty amazing to watch the waves.
This is part of the price you have to pay for living out here and having this, pretty nice lifestyle in the summer. Yeah.
We look to Washington now. We've got Peter Baker on the line, standing by there. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Louise. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us. I know it's been a busy day down there with stuff shut down. Now, Peter, you went to the White House this afternoon and heard President Obama's speech, right?
President Obama, exactly. He canceled his campaign appearance in Orlando to fly back to Washington and monitor storm developments. After meeting with top advisors in the Situation Room, he came down to the briefing room, made a statement that was televised to the nation. Basically, the gist of it was it's a big storm, a lot of preparations have been made, but in the end, he was urging Americans to listen to their local officials, evacuate when they're told, or do other things that their governments are telling them to do. Don't delay, because lives are at stake.
You know, we're coming into this hurricane after having been in a really caustic part of the campaign. The candidates have been throwing barbs at each other, and so do you see this changing the tone for a few days? Do you see it changing the tone through the election? What are you seeing in terms of what the candidates are saying?
Well, I do think it freezes the campaign for a couple of days. President Obama canceled not only this morning's appearance in Florida, but also tomorrow's trip to Wisconsin he was going to make. Governor Romney, his opponent, canceled his events tonight and tomorrow. And even other events that are going on with Vice President Biden, President Clinton, other surrogates, Congressman Ryan, they're overshadowed by this sort of monster storm. And I think it kind of sort of leaves the conversation sort of on hold basically until Wednesday or Thursday when things begin to clear up and people might start thinking about politics again.
And of course, when the storm does end, there'll be a lot of damage potentially. You know, if the electricity could be off, and that's a big role for the federal government. So President Obama may or may not be able to do a lot more campaigning. I mean, what do you see FEMA and other federal agencies having to do in terms of cleaning this up?
Right, exactly. Obviously, this is such a large expanse of territory that this storm is going to hit. There's a lot of different potential impacts that the president, as the commander-in-chief of the FEMA and all the different agencies and even the National Guard, where they're necessary, has a role to play. It's as an electoral thing, as a campaign thing, there are advantages and disadvantages to that. As an advantage, obviously, he gets to look presidential in this moment when people are making up their minds. The disadvantage, of course, is if they're unhappy with his performance, if for some reason he leaves them feeling a sense of lacking, that he didn't respond the way they wanted to. So, it's a precarious balance for a sitting president who has to both oversee a government in a time of crisis as well as be a candidate just 8 days out from a critical election.
You know, our colleague Nate Silver has an interesting posting up now on his 538 blog about how polls, the political polls, may even be affected by this and may not be as accurate, because it tends to be, for instance, that wealthier people have maybe their own generators, and so they may be still reachable for polls, and patches of the country might not be reachable by polls. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. In your own view, who does this help? Does this hurricane and what we're going to see over the next week help Obama, or does it help Romney?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the question that people in Washington are asking, aside from will my power go out? And the truth is, you don't know, because in fact you could play it out all sorts of different ways. It could hurt Obama in the sense that early voting, which he has made a very important part of his strategy, is obviously curtailed for a few days in several important places, particularly battleground states like Virginia. On the other hand, it could, and also, by the way, historically, Republicans have done better when the weather has been bad. Their voters tend to turn out more devotedly on Election Day than Democrats do. Having said that, we've got a full week left. By the time the polls actually do open next Tuesday, a week from tomorrow, presumably the storm will have passed, power will be back on most places. It could still be out in some pockets, which could be a problem, but life will have begun to move on. So, we can game it out in lots of different ways, but the truth is I don't think anybody really knows.
Well, Peter, thanks so much. Stay dry.
Thanks, you too.
Finally, Larry Ingrassia, our business editor, is back with a report from the business desk. Hi, Larry.
Hello, Louise.
Okay, so you've been watching kind of the cost as they've been mounting all day, and companies as they've been canceling events. What are people saying this will cost the economy?
Clearly, this is a big impact. First of all, you just start with insurers. The estimates that some companies now say is that there could be $10 to $20 billion of damages that need to be fixed up. Okay, now that's just starting with kind of damage to property and such. You have a lot of lost, retailers losing some business. You have the New York Stock Exchange closed. You have a lot of companies putting off announcements and delaying things that they were planning to do. Now, on the plus side, if something is damaged, it likely has to be repaired. So that could be a short-term boost to the economy. And if companies put off their announcements, if it's a new product and it's going to come to market next week instead of this week, kind of that's okay. But in the end, it does slow things down. People aren't at work; they're away. If you have something that is damaged, your house is flooded, you're probably not going to be focusing much on your work for the
So that $10 to $20 billion that insurers are expecting. Mm-hmm. So not everyone has insurance for everything. Do you know how much people will be covering out of their own pocket? Because I'm not sure a lot of New Yorkers get hurricane insurance.
Well, and some people also have kind of deductibles and such. That's a good question. I don't know the answer. Typically, though, often maybe 20% may not be covered. Okay, so you have large amounts that may not be covered by insurance, so it's a cost to somebody. Of course, again, there's the upside is that's going to be business for somebody.
Right, now we're coming into the holiday shopping season, which is always important, especially in such a tentative economy. Right. If you go down New York today, you see Saks is boarded up. What are retailers saying about this?
A lot of retailers, most retailers aren't too worried, particularly this year, because they say that people have been putting off some of their holiday purchases until after the election. this is one of those times where people are it's a little bit of a wait and see. Remember that consumers have been a bit more optimistic than they have in the past year or two.
Right. In fact, the Commerce Department today, even though Washington's generally shut down today, the Commerce Department still came out with the spending report today. It showed that spending's up a little.
Right. And so I think retailers aren't too worried. Now, they might be worried if this, is more prolonged. This is not a one-day event like a lot of these things are. It's going to be a 2 or 3 day event. And to the extent that it really keeps people from going shopping for a while, that could have an impact. Most retailers are a bit sanguine, though. They think that, if somebody's not going to purchase it today and they really need it, they're going to buy it next week anyway. So I'm not quite so worried. There's a lot of pluses and minuses as far as economic activity. It'll slow down and then pick up.
Now, some of the companies that canceled announcements, Google, they were supposed to unveil their new phone.
Right.
That was a big thing.
Yep.
What other companies canceled announcements today?
I think that, I think you said Google.
Yep. Facebook was going to announce something at FAO Schwartz, the big toy store.
They were going to
here
show
in New
something
York.
off. I mean, there's a series of companies. Again, I'm not so worried about that as, kind of a long-term effect on the business. I mean, the other thing is that if you step back, the real issues facing the economy, the fiscal cliff, and the continued economic crisis in Europe. Those are bigger issues, and I think that this is going to be a little bit of a short-term thing. It's going to bother people, but those are the things that most investors, I think, will look at for a while. Finally, the longer the stock market is closed, it's closed today, it's going to be closed tomorrow, a little bit of concern that there's volatility. You have this pent-up, buying and selling demand. And so if people are kind of waiting, things could be backed up. There could be a little bit of volatility when it opens up. And so I think people should watch for that. And if you're an investor, you probably should sit tight instead of, reacting too strongly one way or the other.
Well, it seems like it all depends on just how bad this storm ends up being.
As
so
you can
it's kind
tell,
of a wait and see.
As you can tell, 10 to 20 billion in damages, that's a pretty wide
huge
range. That's, they're making a little bit of a guess right now.
Absolutely. Well, we'll stay on these numbers, and thank you so much for joining us, Larry.
Thanks, Louise.
I'll be back again at 5:30 with further reports from our reporters in the field and here in the newsroom. I'm Louise Story, reporting for the New York Times. Thanks for watching.